Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And number 5, the conditions depicted in the photograph were associated with which of the following political changes? Erica.
D.
Beautiful. And why is that?
Because during this time, the Democrats wanted big industries and stuff like that, so they supported immigrants coming to work.
Awesome. And finally, number 6, which of the following was most likely Reese's purpose in publishing the photograph in How the Other Half Lives? Naziah.
For number 6, I said B, because they were using the yellow journalism during this time to evoke more opinions within the public in order to get them to make some changes and reforms during this time, because it was like or in the golden age, correct? If I'm correct.
Beautiful. So Naziah is getting a merit for pushing her answer to include the key term yellow journalism. Okay, we are going to transition to a lecture. So go ahead and take the next 30 seconds to make sure you have paper and a pen or pencil to take notes. We're going to transition to a quick oral drill and then a lecture. Remember, your lecture notes will be 50% of your class grade for today. So I'll give you guys 30 seconds to make sure you have all your materials. Kezia just let me know I forgot to post the slides into Google Classroom. I will post these slides into Google Classroom when I post the video. So these slides will be available in the next hour and a half. So whenever the video gets posted, I'll make sure I include these slides. Thank you for flagging that, Kezia. Okay, let's go ahead and go into a quick oral drill. Reminder to unmute yourself if I call your name to give the definition. You can use resources, including your period 5 notes, to answer the oral drill. Remember, you just have to try, and that is what's going to get you the credit for the cold call. Okay, so starting off the oral drill, what is the Reconstruction period? The Reconstruction period, Dwayne.
It was a time after the Civil War, well, around that area, around that time period, when they were fixing places up, like building things, like the immigrants that they had come to the U.S., they used them to build like canals and things like that.
Think about the Reconstruction, like how you mentioned it was after the Civil War. What is Reconstruction in the South trying to do?
Like, I don't know, like build painting. I don't know.
Cedric, go ahead and help Dwayne.
The Reconstruction was after the Civil War, and the North sent troops to the South. What was it for? Let me see. Wasn't it to get the Confederate States back into the Union?
Beautiful. And so Cedric's getting merits for that. For more merits, what were the goals of Reconstruction specifically? Cedric pointed out the need for, Nyasia.
The overall goal of Reconstruction was to rebuild and fix the South after the Civil War and re-invite them back into the country.
Mm-hmm. And who were they trying to protect? Who was trying to get protected during Reconstruction?
African Americans.
Beautiful. Have that written down. Okay, what is the Emancipation Proclamation? The Emancipation Proclamation, Ziara.
The Emancipation Proclamation was Mm, Did it have something to do with a president trying to? I feel like I know what it is, but I can't think.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you to stamp it for us. Ariana, go ahead and tell us what the Emancipation Proclamation is.
It was by Lincoln, and he was basically saying like all held slaves were like free, pretty much.
Great. Ziara, what was the Emancipation Proclamation?
It was when Lincoln tried to free slaves, and he said that all slaves were free.
Beautiful. And what are the Black codes? The Black codes, Jamal. Or Jamal, are you still having mic issues? Yes, Sade.
Didn't it control like the conduct of black people? Like it was like laws for them specifically.
It was laws trying to control what? Sorry, I missed that first part.
Black people.
Yes. Where were the Black codes put in place? North or the South?
The South.
Beautiful. Okay, and finally, what is the 13th Amendment? The 13th Amendment, Tisa.
The 13th Amendment abolished slavery.
Beautiful. Awesome, great short oral drill. Everybody, we're going to go ahead and transition into our lecture. Okay, so today's lecture, we are going to be focused on period 6, which is from 1865 to 1898. So we're looking at how the country as a whole rebuilds itself after the Civil War and into this new era of industrialization. Make sure you are taking detailed notes. Remember, these are 50% of your class grade today. So first, we are going to start with westward expansion, specifically looking at the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. Now, what the Transcontinental Railroad means is the railroad now reaches from New York or the East Coast all the way to California. So this means you can get on a train in New York City and end up in San Francisco. This is the first time that the entire United States is connected through travel other than just like getting on a horse or getting in a wagon and heading west. And after the Civil War, the United States government is trying to encourage people to spread westward and take advantage of this new transcontinental railroad. One of the ways that they do this is the Homestead Act of 1862 or 63. The Homestead Act gives plots of land to farmers in the West with the only provision that they make the land better than when they found it. So all a homesteader, people that take advantage of the Homestead Act, has to do is go get this 20 acres of land and plant something successfully, and they will get this land for free. And this is a way to help encourage spreading westward and expand American farming. This is also taking place during the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is this new time of American ingenuity where you have new inventions coming about that makes either travel west more possible, and it makes it more profitable. This Industrial Revolution is mostly happening in eastern cities, but you do see some expansion into other cities like Chicago and cities in the South. However, most of the industrializing is in these northeastern cities. And the Industrial Revolution's goal is just to make progress through inventions and creativity. As we're talking about the Transcontinental Railroad and the idea of moving west and expanding the United States, there is one other significant group that is sometimes left out of the conversation, known as the Exodusters. The Exodusters are African Americans from the South that are now free and no longer in bondage. African Americans stay in the South and see that under President Johnson or after the Compromise of 1877, that they are still somewhat enslaved. They are either sharecroppers, they are restricted by Black codes, and their rights are continually infringed upon. And so many African Americans with the means and ability to do so leave the South and often find themselves in northern cities getting jobs created by the Industrial Revolution. So period 6 is very much defined by movement and the creation of new regions and identities as people leave where they are from and set out to create a new life somewhere else. This is a picture of the Exodusters, of some of the Exodusters. This leads us to later into the 1880s, where we see a new changing face of the United States. In the early part of the 19th century, most immigrants, what we call old immigrants, were coming from places like England, Germany, France, Ireland. These are Western Europeans that are coming into the United States. However, in the 1870s and 1880s, we see a new set of immigrants coming into the United States. Many of these people are coming from Southeastern European countries. So countries like Italy or Poland, different areas where the culture is different than Western Europeans, which makes them feel, which makes the current United States people other them because they are different types of immigrants. Another group of immigrants that comes over in this wave are from China. And the Chinese culture is very different than the European culture, which also led to them being discriminated against. And one of the most blatant ways that they are discriminated against is through the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act is the first time in American history where the United States says explicitly people from this country cannot come into the United States. One of the main reasons why these new immigrants are coming into the United States is because of the Industrial Revolution. There are suddenly many more jobs that certain Americans do not want to do. They're usually the most dangerous and the least well paid. But because new immigrants are looking to come to the United States for a new life and new opportunities, they are more willing to take these bad jobs and this bad pay as a way to help provide for their family and start a new life. As these new immigrants are taking these jobs, and especially in this era of industrial revolution, where people are no longer just farming or are a part of these larger, I don't want to say corporate jobs, but these larger industrial jobs where there are just tons and tons of workers, they are starting to look at the negative side effects of the Industrial Revolution. Things like the wage gap, things like child labor, and the very poor work conditions. And they start to form labor unions. Labor unions are groups of workers that unite together to try to fight for better wages and better working conditions. Some of these labor unions are successful, but most are not. They do get some better wages, but not wages that they deserved. They are able to put restrictions on child labor, but child labor continues to exist for much longer after this. So with labor unions, we see some success and also some failures. We also see the creation of what we call the Populist Party. And I know we talk about the Populist Party a lot. The Populist Party is led by William Jennings Bryan. And the goal of the Populist Party is to speak on behalf of the farmers. As industrialization increases and new farming tools like tractors and different more effective farming equipment is created, smaller farmers are continually being undermined by large, wealthier farmers. And so the Populist Party works to get forms out of the desire to protect these farmers from losing all of their wages and pushing for them to get better protections on the prices of their crops and not being exploited by the railroad. Awesome. We're now going to transition into what this looks like for Native Americans during this time. As we talked about in the Do Now, this is a very contentious point of time in Native American history. With the Homestead Act, much of that land that is being given to those homesteaders is being taken away from Native Americans. These are Native Americans that are either originally from the Midwest and have been there for centuries, or they are Native Americans that have been pushed from the East Coast into the West. So this is a continuation of the removal of Native Americans from the land that is theirs. We see a lot of resistance from Native Americans towards this further pushback. Most notable is the Little Bighorn, the Battle of Little Bighorn. This is the most notable success of Native American tribes who overpower and beat American cavalry, the American cavalry. And this is kind of a twofold issue. One, Native Americans are successful and they are able to protect themselves. However, we also see this issue of these Native Americans being further demonized by the American public. So even though we have this short victory in the Battle of Little Bighorn, eventually we have the Wounded Knee Massacre, where I believe it's the Dakota tribe is completely obliterated by the American cavalry, and the massacre includes the killing of women and children. This is considered the last of the big Indian wars, and we see the true transition to this policy of assimilation. We talked about assimilation earlier. Assimilation is the new American policy that Native Americans can be quote unquote like turned white. We can the American government believes that they can force them to cut their hair, speak English, convert to Christianity, and they can purify themselves from their native culture and assimilate into white society. And assimilation is formalized through the Dawes Act and the Dawes Act's role with Indian reservations. One of the most famous forms of assimilation is the creation of the Carlisle School. Carlisle is spelled C-A-R-L-I-S-L-E. The Carlisle School is a school where Native children are forced, where the American government forces Native American parents to give up their children and send them to this school where they are taught English, forced to cut their hair, they are forced to wear European clothing, and they are forced to act white. If they are caught speaking their native language or talking about or practicing their native religion, they will be punished for that. So this is so assimilation is not something that Native Americans voluntarily do. They are forced to participate in it. 10 minutes. This leads us to some of the other negative aspects of this time period, and some of the negative aspects of industrialization. As we talked about, industrialization leads to an increase in the wage gap, poor labor conditions for workers, things like child labor, and overall just poor treatment of workers. Another negative aspect are the creation of monopolies. You have things like Standard Oil become the one and only oil company because, as the octopus shows, it is slowly creeping in and taking over old other oil companies, as well as the White House and as well as Congress. Because of monopolies, these very rich corporate leaders are able to buy themselves into things like Congress and have their interests protected. A monopoly is when one person or one corporation has full control over a market. And in monopolies, we see robber barons really come to the forefront. As we talked about when we went over this unit the first time, we have this conflicting idea of people like Rockefeller, JP Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, where people aren't sure if we should consider them captains of industry. Are they leaders? Are they innovators? Are they these men that we should look up to? Or are they robber barons? Are they men that take advantage of their low-wage workers? Do they create these poor conditions for the workers that live there? And do they push for these negative policies? So there's this contrasting idea of robber barons versus captains of industry in this era. As a way to make sure that they are able to maintain this idea that they are a captain of industry or that they are continuing to innovate and make profit, this is the beginning of mass production. Mass production is when you are making mass amounts of one item or one thing and you specialize in it. Mass production is formalized through what we call the assembly line, where instead of a group of 5 to 10 people working together on one item to make that, to create it, instead you have your spot on the assembly line and your one job might be to screw in a bolt or to tighten this part of a wheel. And that is literally all you do over and over every single day. Assembly lines make mass production much faster and much more efficient. Going to the Sherman Antitrust Act, this is the effort to help control monopolies. Monopolies are, again, continuing to just kind of take over industrialization at this point, and Theodore Roosevelt passes the Sherman Antitrust Act, which helps limit the control of monopolies. So during this progressive era, you have some people like robber barons who are taking advantage of others, and then you have other people in power like Theodore Roosevelt who are working to limit the control of these robber barons. And this is an example of all of the large trusts slowly taking over Congress and pushing forward their agendas. Okay, last slide. We're going to quickly talk about imperialism in the United States. The most famous occurrence of United States imperialism is in 1898 with the Spanish-American War. The United States has a very different approach to imperialization than the rest of the world, as they proclaim that they are bringing democracy and other civilized ways of governing into these new areas. One of the most famous is Hawaii. You have the Dole brothers, who are very famous American agriculturalists who go to Hawaii, and under the guise of business and farming things like pineapple and fruit. So if you think about the Dole brand of fruit, that's these guys. They go to Hawaii under this idea of helping out their business, and then they slowly infiltrate and take over their government. And the United States does something very similar in Puerto Rico and the Philippines. So all of these different areas of American imperialism is we go under the United States government goes under the idea that we are going to go in there to benefit their business, benefit their government, and we are only going to control or take over these places until they have the right system in place. But what that turns into is another form of imperialism, where the United States is just there the entire time, controlling their economy and exploiting their workers and their natural resources. President McKinley is the president during the Spanish-American War, and in this political cartoon, we see a conversation between Uncle Sam, representing America, ordering from President McKinley where he wants to go next for his imperialism. Does he want something from Cuba, or more from Puerto Rico, or even the Philippines? So it shows that the United States is looking at this as a place where they can order it and consume all of their natural resources. Okay, we're gonna pause. Any questions about the lecture? Great. Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. I want you to take the next 2 minutes to tell the story of period 6 in your notes. Use at least 3 key terms and two dates from the lecture. In 2 minutes, I will be calling on you to hear what key terms you come up with. Okay, 2 minutes is on the clock. When you pick your 3 key terms, make sure you're ready to justify why you think they're the most important for telling the story of period 6. "45 more seconds. Beautiful. Okay, 2 minutes is up. When I call on you, just tell me one of the key terms that you picked and tell me why you think it is the most important. or one of the most important, starting with Eddie.
The Chinese Inclusion Act.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why. I just thought it stood out
Okay, then tell me like why you think it's important.
because it
Eddie, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
because wasn't there when people came into the U.S. like to increase the population or something like that?
Mm-hmm. It increases the population. But what's significant about the Chinese Exclusion Act? Like, why is it different than other things in the United States past when it comes to immigration?
Did the U.S. treat them harsh or something like that?
Yeah, it treats them negatively. Can somebody build on Eddie's discussion of Chinese Exclusion Act? Cedric.
Actually, never mind. I was gonna say another term.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to you then, Cedric. Madison.
You said it was the first time that American history that they had put like someone cannot go to America, like they were barred from the US.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, what is Cedric? I'm gonna come back to you in a second. I'm just gonna cold call a couple other people. What other key terms did we come up with, Kamisha?
I thought monopolies, robber barons, and imperialism all correlated together because the robber barons wanted to control the larger businesses and companies, so it justifies why they took over so many places.
Beautiful. Okay.
That's my best friend, as she.
Okay. I appreciate the encouragement. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up with Cedric. What did you come up with?
Wow. Let me see if I remember now. Oh, I said the most important term was the Industrial Revolution because let me see. What was it? Oh, because all of the market economy, I don't know how to explain it. I think because of the new technology they were having, that was the reason they were facing all the problems. So I would say the Industrial Revolution was the cause of all the changes.
Beautiful. That's a very good answer. Okay, we are going to go ahead and transition to the exit ticket. The exit ticket is you have a prompt about the Gilded Age, what we just went over, and you need to give me some context key terms, some outside evidence key terms, and then just write a draft thesis answering the prompt. So context terms, evidence terms, and a draft thesis. Go ahead and transition to my misspelled exit ticket. And when you finish up, you are free to go, but we are going to stay on here until 10:50. If you submit it before 10:50, you may go. Janaya just asked a really good question. The difference between the context key terms and the evidence key terms, context refers to within 20 years before it. So give me 2 or 3 key terms that from 1850 to 1870 that helps explain the prompt. And then the outside evidence key terms are going to be things that came from the lecture today that you can use to help answer the prompt. Try to take the next 2 minutes to finish up and get this submitted so you have one less thing going into the rest of your day. Make sure that you are submitting pictures of your lecture notes, which are 50% of your grade. Erin and Ariana, I have yours. Okay, it is 10:50. If you are all free to go. If you would like to stay on for a couple more minutes to ask me any more clarifying questions, you may do so. But otherwise, you are free to go.